Sorry, I was eating a muffin.
Perfect, we got it. Pedro, you got the first one up.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to bring up this topic about the priority of, well, in this case, I think it's everything related to, just selecting reviewers and approval rules, and also now suggested reviewers. And yeah, because priority matters, and we have few resources, so we have to make great priority decisions. And in this case, more on the UX side of things, because there will still be some time here until engineering picks up any of this. And Kai, you brought up this topic or this issue of automatically assigning merge requests based on eligible approvers. And Annabelle, you were going to pick this up as well. And so, yeah, we, some background to this is that we did some exploration some years ago about reconciling reviewers and approval rules to make it, join the two together, because today they're not the same thing. But we didn't prioritize any design work as part of that. We actually, let me move this up. Point C, because it makes more sense this way. In the issue that is linked there at the top, there are some suggestions for some boring solutions, like leveraging the code owner's file to suggest and assign reviewers. And yeah, for those of you who are not aware, we had features similar to this that suggested approvers, and it only worked when we had just one kind of approval rule, basically, where you said, where you basically entered in the settings the default approvers for all merge requests. And we also listed below that field, both in the settings and, or in this case, in the merge requests creation form, we listed some users based on the blame. So it would look at the change files in the MR, and you could click on people's names and it would add them to just an input, text input that was called approvers. But this broke when we added multiple approval rules, and we removed it more recently because we didn't invest time in this reconciliation, and yeah, it's something we didn't continue going forward because we had to understand how this would behave with multiple approval rules, and yeah, we didn't work on that basically. Yeah, and finally, my last point, because before handing it over to Kai or Amy, we also then have the applied machine learning group that is, basically prioritizing the suggested reviewers, which in a way, well, it basically affects the UX of merge requests and how people will perceive any kind of suggestions that we make for reviewer selection. So it kind of also dictates our priority in terms of UX. And I mentioned in the product design finding issue that we need UX support there, and we should keep up with everything that is happening. So yeah, I just wanted to have a more unstructured conversation about how we see the priority of this, and what we can postpone or not, and yeah, how quickly we need to jump on this wagon and think about this through. I'll try to find the links for those things in the meantime.
Cool. Yeah, I would just be curious. The link for the first one for explorations, I'd be curious what was discussed. And then for that feature, I feel like it predates my time at GitLab, maybe, because I don't ever recall seeing that, which makes me think it's like incredibly old. And so I would just be curious what that looked like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I'll try to find it. Yeah, I think we had that somewhere in the documentation.
Yeah. As far as like importance, I don't know. The only reason I had like started a comment on it was because we were having conversations on this particular, the automatically assigned merge for review based on eligible reviewers. We were having conversations about suggested reviewers, and this issue gets this in combination with like automatically assigned group to like issue or to like a merge request review sort of get frequent comments from users. And so I think about them a lot. But largely what the users are asking for is sort of at odds with how we think about code review. And so my comment, like, when I had mentioned Annabelle, was sort of like, we're looking at suggested reviewers, like maybe there's a middle ground here where we don't assign every single person who's an eligible approver to review a merge request, but we leverage some version of whatever we're going to do in the UI for suggestions to sort of like prompt this. People want it for code owners too. They want like every single eligible code owner to automatically be assigned as a reviewer. They want it for like everyone in XYZ team to be assigned as a reviewer. And I don't think that's the right choice. I think like if we're going to build something for suggestions of reviewers, this could be like approvers is potentially one of those inputs that we do, and maybe it's all one feature, maybe it's not, maybe it's, I don't know. And so I don't know how important it is. I think if we're in the area because the applied ML stuff is like sort of not a forcing function, but a forcing function in terms of like suggested reviewers, that we should probably be cognizant of all of these other very, in my mind, very similar and related things. If that makes sense. But I don't know that I would go and like solve these. If we didn't have suggested reviewers from the applied ML group pushing us to solve this in some way, I don't think this would be the most important thing that I would go solve.
Exactly.
I would also recommend playing the game of, will the docs team come find you if this gets turned on? Because as described, we have a lot of previous contributors to any page. And I could see how on high trafficked files in the repo, ooh, that'd be some noise. The docs team ruins everything, I know.
So what is the gist of this?
I guess like I think that my question is probably back to you is I know there's been some recent conversations about potentially changing the way the applied ML suggested reviewer stuff ends up in the UI. I think the question is like, I think my question would be, is the sort of interim proposal there, one, the right one? I think I've left some feedback there, but two, are we taking into account maybe all of these other ways that like suggesting reviewers might be important? And is the first UI treatment that applied ML might get probably the right one that we want to use for everything? Or should we like look at all these other things at the same time? And if the answer is no, we don't need to take into account these other ones right now, we'd like get the applied ML one going, get feedback and go on, that's fine. If it may make sense to look at all of them, then like let's try, and I can help find all these issues where sort of people are asking for this functionality, and we can at least like, get a sense of what that looks like and make sure we're not missing anything obvious.
Yeah, so we have I think things become tricky when we introduce approval rules and multiple approval rules. Because if you're not using that, which is, basically, if you look at some of our other competitors, you just have, a default, either a default list of reviewers that are suggested or automatically assigned, or they read from the code owner's file or from the blame and suggest based on that. But we have this other level of complexity where if you have approval rules, how do you join all of that together and make a intuitive experience? We could go the boring solution route and suggest reviewers based on the code owners or the blame or both, while not solving that problem with approval rules. But that would mean that, if you're using approval rules and you're trying to make things, you have great policies and things are organized in your project, we don't suggest anything. Like, if you need to throw out of the window approval rules if you want suggestions, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It could be an iterative path, right? If we wanted to build it that way, but I don't think it's a iterative path from a design standpoint and validation standpoint, right? I think it would be more helpful for us to know what is the ideal future state with all of those things into account, and then slowly build from there and gain usage feedback. Because that's more or less what happens when we introduced multiple approval rules, is that we didn't actually design the multiple approval rules feature with that old suggested approvers feature. We didn't consider it, so it broke, and we didn't know how to reconcile all of that, and like, oh, okay, yeah, forget about that. So we didn't properly iterate on it. So yeah, if we're basically being kind of forced to prioritize suggested reviewers from the applied machine learning group, it kind of means that we have to work on this, right? And we could just look at what they're doing and improve the experience there. So have a great experience for suggestions that come out of this machine learning thing. But in reality, we'd have to look at everything, because the only thing that's changing is how we calculate suggestions in the backend, which for the user, it really doesn't matter. What matters is, here are the suggestions, and do they make sense to you? And can you use them well? Can you apply them well? Are they presented in a way that is intuitive? And so, yeah, that is why I wanted to bring this up, because from everything that I'm seeing, it feels like we're basically being forced to prioritize this from a UX standpoint, and we'd have to look at all of this and make sense of it, and even take into account those boring solutions that are actually really nice first steps. Just look at code owner's file. Okay, how can we make that work with what we have today? Look at blame. Okay, how can we make that work today? But I think we need to look at all of those pieces together, so that we also don't trip up the work that the applied ML group is doing. So basically, I think, and I'm just thinking out loud, and feel free to interrupt me, but what I'm seeing is, in the spectrum of, least complex to most complex solution, or least sophisticated to most sophisticated, we have the applied ML group, which is trying the most sophisticated solution, and they're working on that now, and we need to have a good experience for that. And on the other hand, we have many users who maybe don't use approval rules or use them, but they're just saying, we don't want machine learning, we just want that basic thing that competitors give us. So how do we make all of this work, right? So I think we need to look at this whole spectrum, not just look at one end or the other, but look at everything together, so that we have a coherent direction to move forward with. What do you think, Annabelle?
I don't have too much to add right now. Yeah, I was kind of wondering why we were kind of talking about this so much. Now I understand that it's kind of being not necessarily forced on us, but we do need to address it for the other team. Yeah, again, I don't have anything to add because I agree with all the points that have been made. We can't really, does approvals override the suggestions? I don't necessarily want to add code owner suggestions. So, okay, what is the problem right now? Like the current status of the design that was proposed months ago has been kind of put on hold. And I haven't looked at it since last Thursday, so I need to check on that. But we're going to potentially only add these suggestions into the reviewer dropdown, hopefully just now while we work through all of this. So we don't have, you know, a huge chunk of UI that doesn't really help anyone. What is, I guess I'm still not sure why this is coming up again. Why do we need to implement something using no ML things right now?
I would say we don't need to. I think the question is the maybe let's rephrase it. ML or no ML, what is being proposed in design is how we would suggest reviewers. The criteria for how we suggest those, there's a bunch of different things that we could start using, right? There's the ML one, we could do approval rules, we could do code owner rules, we could do blame data, we could do all kinds of things to like manipulate the criteria. I think the question is like, is that the right UI for suggested reviewers in general, regardless of sort of whether we use the ML or not? And then I think on top of that, and this is where I have related them in my head. Go see mom. Sorry, there's a kid crying. Where I've related them in my head is there are people like this issue is not actually about the one that got linked is not actually about suggested reviewers. What these people want is, or what is being proposed, not what these people, what is being proposed and what some users have asked for is actually like, we want everyone who could be an improver to automatically be set as a reviewer on the merge request. And there are customers that have asked for that too. We're like, if we have an approval rule that says these 7 people have to approve this merge request, and we only need one of those 7 people, make all 7 of them a reviewer of the merge request. And so I think the question is like, how do we rationalize those concepts to make sure that we're meeting the needs of people who are looking for help in setting reviewers, and also how we're meeting the needs of where we want to intervene and like suggest reviewers based on data that we have or that we want to put into there and make, you know, things smarter. Because I think we would all agree assigning 7 people as a reviewer when you only need one of them as a reviewer is not a thing that we want to happen.
So, but and I still think I'm missing something, so I apologize. But how, let's say in that example, we did implement it so that if you have a special or a specific approval rule that says one of these 7 people need to approve it, if they did show up in the dropdown as the main suggested approvers, or sorry, suggested reviewers, that seems like it would fit with the general UI proposal anyway. Right?
I think potentially, yes. I think the question is like, do we want to look at all of those kinds of cases and make sure that UI proposal would meet sort of all of those cases, right? Like, would they meet the cases of code owners? Would they meet the cases of approval rules? Would they meet the cases of teams where people want to sort of like specify teams that have to review everything?
So
like, how do we do that in a way where like the applied ML is very limited, right? It's like 5. We're only ever going to return 5, I think is what the max was. In our case, we could have 3 approval rules that have 7 people each that are all different. So how do we show 21 people in the UI?
Well, hopefully we just pick one, like round robin style. But so when I was doing the competitor analysis, you could choose these. So is this question like, I mean, there are so many ways we could go with this. This is a huge UX issue. That's it. Okay, just checking. I wasn't sure if this was like a, hey, let's do something right now. Let's discuss it now and come to a conclusion. Okay,
No,
No, I
that's
think
what I was
is
confused
it
about.
yeah, is it so huge of a UX thing that we should like zoom out from just suggested reviewers and look at all these other things and make sure that we're on a track to like deliver all of these things at some point, not anytime soon necessarily, but like, do we need to look at that end state user experience if we were to build sort of all these other features? Or could we go with what we're going to do for suggested reviewers and then figure out how to like manipulate everything back into it? Or are we going to end up in a position where we're like, oh, the UI we've chosen for suggested reviewers now doesn't work when we expand to 30 people that could be suggested, all these sort of other questions we might have.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I don't need to like come up with the UI right now.
No.
Okay, yeah. Okay. That's
Yes,
super
on the
interesting.
spot.
I love I love the
Fly
idea
from
of
it.
reconciling approvals and reviewers. I find that concept already very confusing. I hope that we wouldn't show 30 options. Like, I think some of the cool things I saw from competitors were like, choose based on workload, choose based on work balance. What do you want to override what? Do you want approvals to override code owners? Hopefully, to override blame data. And then, I mean, ML can come in and do their fancy stuff where you can like pick the person that's the most useful. But even if we didn't have any ML, like it would, okay, yeah, I don't have anything specific to say here. I understand the point, the problem. That's all.
yeah, I think that what you said in that other issue, okay, let's pause, that not very big, but that's a sidebar design where you had the plus buttons and just show the suggestions in the drop down. I think that is a useful iteration. It doesn't corner us necessarily. We're using an existing pattern. So I think that's fair for the short term. Overall, I think what we should talk about is, talk with the ML group to understand what they're planning on doing and if it's the right thing, and if it intersects with this issue, like the issue that I linked at the top, because that issue is like the source of information is approvers. Is that something that we're like the ML group is going to do somehow or not? When are they going to do it? So I think we need to start there and talk with the people that are, actively working on something to suggest reviewers, so that we can then make sense of the work that we need to do. Because the people in that issue that, as Kai was saying, customers want to automatically assign all of the approvers that they have set, or eligible approvers, or look at code owners and things like that. I completely understand where they're coming from. But in this case, we have a group that is actively working on using machine learning to do that. And whatever they do, it will affect the UX soon. So I think we need to start there and then deconstruct the problem and understand, as I said, if this intersects with approvers or with code owners or with blame. And maybe what we can then do is design a solution that works for the most sophisticated case, which is, using machine learning and lots of inputs and data, but can also then be trimmed down to work very well with just code owners or with blame. I don't know. Does that make sense? Okay, I see.
I still don't know what the next step is, or if we're just discussing this to, I mean, you said that, yeah, we'll talk to the machine learning group. I'm still finding it difficult to figure out what we're talking about. Like, are we still going through with the proposal? I don't know what their status is with their comment version right now. If we're moving forward with releasing that to anybody else other than just the pilot groups or companies, or are we talking about spending time, just us, going back and trying to map all this out and figure out how to make it all work long term?
I think what I would suggest as the most reasonable first step here is to get up to date on everything that the ML group is doing, talk with them, understand their vision, if they've done any research at all, if we need to do research on that, so that we can then plan out what we're going to do. You know, is this a long game for them, or do they just want to ship like one first iteration of, or a couple of iterations of suggested reviewers, and then they're going to pivot to something else? Do they want to own everything that has to do with suggesting reviewers, or just things that are related to machine learning? So I think we need to make sense of that. And I think acting on that issue of automatically assigning based on eligible approvers, doing anything right now as a reaction, might put us at risk from an iterative standpoint. So I think it's wiser to just get up to date on everything that they're doing before responding to that issue and deciding what to do with it. What do you think?
Me?
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. I need to gather more information because I'm not sure what the status is of anything right now. So I'm looking at that issue. So the reaction that you mentioned about this issue specifically, what action were you talking about? Like having an action as a reaction to this specific issue? Like, what did you mean by that?
I mean, it could be, you know, saying or immediately jumping into design and designing something that would work for this, or picking up on those boring solutions and putting together something that we could easily ship or not. That's the kind of reaction that I was talking about.
Yeah, I assigned it to myself after we talked about this. I think I talked with Marcel, but I wrote, I'm just going to look into it. So yeah, I don't think anyone's expecting a design out of this.
Yeah, okay,
hopefully.
Cool. Yeah, I think based on that and understanding where they are, and then having a solid UX presence with that group, we can then understand what we need to prioritize, and what falls on us only in code review, what is a concern of both groups, and pick it up from there. What do you think, Kai? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I had no expectations that we would actually do anything with this issue other than I just was, it's worth thinking about as we think through things.
Okay.
I think talking with the applied ML group makes sense. Like, let's figure out what they're going to do, what else we need to take into account, and just sort of make sure we've got those things in mind as we're looking through solutions there.
Are you thinking of having that sync conversation this milestone?
Yeah, I think synchronous, asynchronous, whatever you prefer, or I think whatever works best for everyone. Yeah, but this milestone, yeah, I think as soon as possible, basically, because they're actively working on it, and we're already getting feedback from internal usage of that comment, the reviewer suggestion comment in MRs. So the sooner we get our foot in and help, them, have a great experience, the better.
Okay. Are you going to post that somewhere on this issue, or should I do that?
You mean the issue of the one that linked at the top, the automatically assigned based on eligible approvers?
Yes, or somewhere else. Or who's going to do the next thing and where?
I'll set something up with them to like have a conversation about what the status is.
Okay.
I'll grab Taylor and do that. And
Okay.
then invite.
That's okay, Kai. Thanks.
Cool. We are over. 2 we're skipping. Then you've got 3.
We don't need to like actually discuss this, but yeah, if you guys can read it over and suggest anything, then we can do that async.
And is the ask is that I just want to be clear. The ask is that of these like 4 issues, we would make sure they're ready for a community contributor to pick up.
Yes, not necessarily just those 4. Those are ones that Pedro found. But if there are other ones that relate to the benchmarking work that we did, then those are applicable too. But what the ask is that when this blog post comes out, that we have 5-ish issues that are ready for community contribution. And they don't all have to come from code review. So it creates stage in general. But if there are a few that are good targets, then it's good for me to be aware so that you guys are aware so that we can get them in a good state.
Do you have an ETA of when you would need these like triaged and like concrete proposals?
No, but I will get that for you. I just know that it's a KR for this quarter for us, so by end of quarter.
For ones that are ready, like the fixed data loss one has a proposal in it. Is there a label you want us to add?
There will be, because that's part of this blog process. But for now, if we can maybe use this list as the running candidate list, and then I'll triage. Or if there's a better way to do it, I don't have a preference.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. I'll take a look at and see which ones I think are ready. I hope that we don't need a lot of design work to get some of these ready. That's what I'm hoping. But yeah, those 4 at a glance seem to be the ones that are closest or that are already ready. So.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, let me know, if it's too tall of an ask. I know you guys are very busy, so we can cherry pick ones that are like pretty much almost ready or are ready, and I will be asking the other groups in Create as well. So even if there's 2 or 3, that would be great.
And to your point about this being a KR, is the KR to publish the blog post by the end of the quarter? What is the goal at the end of the quarter?
I think the KR is just that we have the process. This is something we want to do from UX research, like on a more consistent basis. So we're like piloting the process with this particular. The idea is we have like a research project that results in some kind of actionable insight issues, and we want to throw some of those back to the community as just like a regular process that we do. And so we haven't done that before. Getting a blog post published is kind of a process. At the moment, there's a lot of hurdles, and so we just want to like streamline that basically.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Mhm. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week.